Raquel Rosen, the floor is yours.
Hi, this is Raquel Rosen with the Colorado Academy of Family Physicians. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar. Our presenter today is Beau Bobbitt, an experienced healthcare attorney and physician advocate. He is working on behalf of family physicians all over the country, and in particular in Colorado, as an accountable care organization's strategist and counselor. This webinar is part of a series of webinars and seminars on the ACOs. You may submit questions at any time. Please use the chat feature at the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Type in your question and then press send. Mr. Bobbitt will be presenting another webinar on November 2nd at noon with additional information, and also teaching at the CAFP's annual scientific conference in April. Thank you to COPIC for your generous contribution making this ACO educational series possible. Mr. Bobbitt, you may begin.
Thank you, Raquel. I've got to start off by expressing appreciation for the consistent involvement of the Academy on the accountable care movement. This is part of that educational series of papers, webinars, articles, and live presentations that Raquel mentioned. Because we've covered the basics in print and live in an earlier webinar and with some white papers on your behalf, we can be a little more ambitious today in what we'll cover. We hope to leave time for Q&A. In fact, I know we will in the hour allotted. You can see that these are not theoretical types of discussion points. They're very practical, dialed into the family physician's real-world situation. The primer for this is free online. Go to the Academy's website, and that would be on CAFP's, I believe, medical homepage. On it also are earlier PowerPoints and other resources. Almost everything I cover today will have been handled in much more detail in these other materials. Well, what is an ACO? This will be an abbreviated flyby on some of the fundamentals of ACO and ACO strategies, where we'll go to more of an intermediate or advanced level of what do you do Monday morning as a family physician in Colorado. But just to recap, the keys are that it is for a patient population. Let's say a state Medicaid population, as is evolving in your state. Let's say 10,000 morbidly obese patients, a project I'm working on. That's the biggest mental leap for physicians. You're so well trained, and your day-to-day life has been to do the best you can, one patient at a time. But this is to think of the bigger picture of avoiding hospitalizations, smoother care flow, avoiding duplication for that whole population. Think of the predicted $30 million in savings for a large population. Let's say my complex morbidly obese patient with at least one comorbidity. And so that's the actual predicted savings for the accountable care initiative. The savings pool, the general rule is to have 1/2 of that. 50% of the savings of that $30 million savings goes back to those who brung you, to use a North Carolina expression. It is based on, the distribution of it is based on contributions to the value. So and much of that these days is to go back to primary care. When we're talking about definitions and words, an accountable care organization is not confined to those 400 pages of the proposed Medicare regulations that are getting universally panned these days. That was so bad and gave accountable care organizations such a bad name that I actually quit using that phrase for a while. More on that. That's predicted to be fixed, and those regulations are really, the final regulations are actually due out any day now. As Raquel said, I've represented doctors as an advocate for a long time, and I've done this before, many times before. And I know this: if you're not listening, it really doesn't matter what I say. I've heard all the reasons for you all the excuses for you not to be involved, not to pay attention to this issue. And I'll tell you, here's why you shouldn't be interested, just to let you know I know. And this is why culture is going to be such a big deal in the accountable care movement. You're justifiably cynical. You don't have any free time, and you have an even less of a war chest. This is so different and out of your comfort zone that it has triggered stress. And that triggers the survival instincts of flight, fight, or freeze. My job is to show you the opportunity that lies behind that uncertainty. Okay, here are the reasons you should be interested. Doing nothing is actually a choice, a big choice. Staying with our unsustainable status quo is a guarantee that you will be working harder and earning less. Why not run healthcare, squeeze out the waste, and be rewarded professionally and financially for so doing? One answer is that it's so complex, but it's not nearly as complex as, say, undergraduate chemistry, which I took. And the reason for that is the Academy's resources that have been available. Somebody else has spent 1,000 hours, broken this subject down, built it back into tools for you to use at sort of executive briefing level. It's taken the mystery out of this. But really, in the back of your mind, is this really coming? Well, this is to me is the reason this is different from, let's say, capitation or gatekeepers in the past. We think there has to be fundamental change with or without, quote, Obamacare. It's inevitable. Those of you with super high-definition screens can see that by 2035, Medicare and Medicaid alone will consume 13 to 14% of the gross domestic product, and all health care will consume 31%. And the rule of thumb, of course, is that 19% of the GDP is all that we can collect in taxes and other revenues. By 2080, and I think the chart has gotten even steeper on this, actually, since this Congressional Budget Office study, Medicare and Medicaid alone will consume all of our revenues. So everything else, national defense, national debt, roads, education, we'll all have to borrow. It's totally unsustainable. There are prior lectures and these white papers that then review all the possible fixes and turn healthcare over to physicians and facilities to do a better job and be rewarded, change the reimbursement from volume to value, basically, which is basically what accountable care organizations are all about, really is the only viable option. There is no plan B. Well, what about those regs that were so bad I quit using the term ACO? Well, last month at the American Academy of Family Physicians Scientific Assembly, the CMS representative promised that the final regs, which are now in the office of the OMB, just days before release, will be primary care friendly and not require upfront funding. And if the country's biggest payer really gets behind ACOs in a practical, workable way, not to mention primary care friendly ACOs, it will clearly move the needle. Regardless, Medicaid programs, self-funded, insurance companies, everybody else are moving forward toward the value-based reimbursement or accountable care system. Even without those regulations, or even without people trying to be certified as for the shared savings program under PPACA, Medicare is going to go forward. I've got several demonstration projects on my desk now, and if because we simply have an unsustainable system, I think we'll see demonstration projects out of Medicare on steroids, even if those regulations are as bad as the proposed regulations were. Let's get down to brass tacks. Here are the top 10 strategies for the Colorado family physician. Strategy number 1. It is not daunting. If you read the blueprint, again, downloadable free off the website, you literally can be up to speed in a matter of hours. Get just one person in your group or a couple in your community or your medical home network to get up to speed. Given the stakes, not being prepared is simply not an option. We covered this last May, and the blueprint devotes 20, 30 pages to this, but here are the 8 essential elements for every successful ACO. A couple of tips. It doesn't matter who sponsors it, but it must be fair and reward those in proportion to contribution, with primary care having the most upside potential in every ACO. As these things evolve, most of the expenses in healthcare and hospitals, and so there could be a lot of strategies that develop, and those that can attack that other than you by avoiding hospitalizations may change the reward ratio, but right now, as you'll see briefly, the low-hanging fruit really is in the hands of primary care, and that's why everybody's so frantic to get primary care on board in all accountable care organizations. Culture is the biggie. It's the hardest change. I touched on that. By the way, those ACO proposed regulations gave zero treatment to culture. This isn't my statement, but I think maybe it's the best statement at all in all the accountable care literature, that the challenge is not in forming an ACO, but in forging an ACO. It shouldn't really even be called accountable care organization. It should be called accountable care systems. It's physicians and facilities willing to drop their guard, get out of their silos, and be interdependent, to have a little degree of trust and to have to be accountable, that's where the word came from, to each other for the success, their financial and patient care success. And as you know, that's quite a change from where we've evolved in our healthcare system today. Primary care has got to be at the core. That's just where the low-hanging fruit is. It is fundamental that we need aligned financial incentives. You need to be motivated to refer to a physician, let's say if that's the best practice, but a surgeon needs to be motivated not to do surgery and refer to you if that's the best practice. The rule of thumb, and what I like, I actually got a deal from a public payer where the medical home ACO gets 80% of the savings, but the rule of thumb is 50% of savings, and that's to me, that's, for the time being, that's I think the preferred practical accountable care financial incentive to align everybody's incentives to deliver the highest quality at the lowest cost. And you need a decent-sized patient population, obviously, to make this work. It's sort of a duh moment to know you need administrative capabilities such as accounting and contracting. Health information technology, of course, it needs to be physician controls. You need to you don't need to own it or pay for it, but you definitely need to be in on the design of it. For example, is the severity adjustment appropriate? Is the data collection something that you would trust? And part of data would be the performance benchmarking. It doesn't matter in this world. It doesn't matter if you do a great job. It's how you grade out. Is what you did properly captured, and are the benchmarks hurdles you have to get over to meet the performance thresholds? Are they actually fair? Are they actually probative of the quality and efficiency of care that you delivered, for your specialty? Patient engagement. is, to me, is an exciting development that's being recognized more and more. If your income is tied to results and the patients are not in the game, it's not going to work. But there's a lot of new activity there, and these are consistent with the patient-centered medical home principles. We touched on having an adequate patient population and best practices. Obviously, well, maybe not so obviously. It's been so long since primary care physicians and other specialists have been asked to run the new health care. It's not some external UR set of dogma, but it's what you design. Now, take nationally credible pathways for particular diagnoses, of course, but tweak them and have peer buy-in, local peer buy-in for what those best practices are. So that it is your pathway, it is your data set. It is you have been handed back the physician-patient relationship. Why physicians, particularly primary care physicians, are resistant to this movement is a bit of a mystery to me, and I'm just got to conclude after dozens of presentations and interactions. It's that fear of the unknown and this being so alien and have been so burned in the past to not be able to get as far as we've gotten it today, which is give it a hard look and see there really is opportunity in all this uncertainty if physicians step up at the right time. Okay, and this is sort of in part of a recap, but being prepared. Okay, you know where do you need to be, and then the logical question was, how do I translate that into an actual ACO? I know where to go. How do I get there? So in that blueprint, you've got, which we did with your academy, some other states, and the AAFP, we put in a step-by-step guide to actually building an ACO. I was in a meeting last night, 100% physician-developed. It's an outgrowth of a family physician run medical home network. It's a specialty initiative, but we're at step 5. We've designed the program, and we're expanding we're getting ready to roll it out with to the physician community and the hospital and so forth. So this really does work. So not to beat a dead horse, but strategy number 1. You can be up to speed, know what to do, know what the principles are, know actually how to build them, have all that work prepped, and know what the strategies for family physicians are in just a handful of hours. And that by far that gives you immediate advantage, and it can move your seat at the table, give you a seat at the table, but maybe move it to the head of the table just by having some of your peers do your homework. Strategy number 2 is make sure your practice has PCMH functionality. NCQA recognition is not essential; it's the functionality. But you need to coach that patient through the system. It's interesting, though. I'm doing contracts for medical home-centric ACOs, and outside payers are, in the last month or two, increasingly looking for NCQA recognition and so forth, more as credentialing. But what you really need is the functionality, and I'll touch on that next slide. Patient engagement, newly important. We talked about HIT is going to be a platform for collaboration and sharing of information. And instead of a burden with the 8 to 10 minutes you have under fee-for-service for your patients, it will actually be an essential component for your practice. So do your practice assessment. Next thing I do is create a medical home neighborhood, if you will. That's why I'm not so hung up on the PCMH recognition. If you're standing on an island, that doesn't impress me. It's really how your medical home. Remember, we're talking about maybe 120,000 patients, say 120,000 Medicaid patients, and it's really about how you coordinate that across settings and that kind of population. So it's PCMH functionality and PCMH networking and collaboration. There's the reason I have the logo of Community Care of North Carolina. That abstract's fine for some people, but a lot of people would rather have let me kick a tire. Let me see something concrete. And as you probably know, Community Care of North Carolina was created by family physicians. It now has, it's statewide, has 14 regional networks so that it covers all 100 counties in North Carolina. And there may be a behavioral therapist and a care coordinator for all the practices in one of these 14 networks. So that allows them to leverage up expertise and resources. But they have one statewide health information exchange system with really exciting data, real-time data that's being placed in the provider portal. The Brookings Institution, when I gave this talk, an ACO talk at the AAFP meeting in Orlando, I think literally every person in the room wrote this down, that the Brookings Institution actually funded a how-to portal on their website, and very significant, really, and it gets into the culture and really building it from scratch deeply into a fee-for-service system about 7 or 8 years ago. It shouldn't be nearly that hard, and I know your state already has made great strides in this regard, and I believe has actually, Alan Dobson or some others from CCNC have actually visited you. But if you go to their website, there's actually a very extensive, well-done portal that may keep you from having to perhaps reinvent the wheel. Okay, obviously the medical home network will be at the heart of every successful ACO. What's the difference between a medical home and an accountable care organization? Medical home emphasizes strengthening and empowering primary care to coordinate care across the continuum of care, and an ACO is different really in using two respects. The medical home lacks the shared accountability feature. I'll go back to that, my shared savings across specialties and practices feature. So there's a financial hook there that's usually not present in a medical home. And even though there are medical home ACOs, the typical accountable care organization will extend the care coordination a little bit deeper through the care continuum through select relationships with physician specialists and possibly hospitals. And that's really the type of initiative I was on last night. We're extending the treatment and life management for the morbidly obese into the inpatient setting where these patients go all the time, and the transition and flow is really a train wreck in most parts of the country. Again, as long as it has the 8 elements, don't be concerned who sponsors the ACO. Strategy 5, don't these things cost millions of dollars? How can you participate without a huge war chest? This is a concrete example of the new primary care leverage. Now, maybe for once you'll need to get antitrust advice because the leverage is moving in your favor. So that's a different subject. Don't abuse your power, but led nationally by cash-strapped Medicaid programs, you could form a medical home network and receive a modest per member per month care coordination fee. Medicare and others might also be interested. I understand you're moving in that direction, actually in Colorado now, and although this isn't the home run, it's really not a total ACO, it gets you enough to get your infrastructure started. Another thing that I'd like, as a physician advocate, I'd like to remind you of, or maybe clue you into, is that the meaningful use EHR regulations they actually culminate with the same health information exchange that your accountable care organization needs. So, in fact, that's the point. of all of this, of having interoperable health information exchange. There are incentives. Why not think of what your accountable care organization needs on its technology platform, and then use your meaningful use incentive payments to have the federal government pay for your ACO technology. Well, how do you do it without losing your shirt? These are all questions that I've been asked. We've been asked by family physicians around the country. The way I would definitely do this, I was in the minority for a while. The federal proposed ACO regulations do not agree with me, but and that is don't take downside risk. And what does that mean? Take shared savings on top of fee-for-service payments. That's been panned by ACO theorists. Why? Because fee-for-service obviously still promotes that volume mentality, and they say you need to have skin in the game. Well, that's fine, and probably at Harvard or that academic setting, that makes sense. It's very logical. But I've just done this too much. I even remember capitation. There's just so many things beyond the physician's control. Patient compliance, non-compliance, hospital costs, bugs in your data collection, imperfect severity adjustment, imperfect performance metrics, a catastrophe. You're a self-funded employer. You might have 10,000 people in your patient population, but if you have a bus wreck or some premature babies, it blows your numbers. They're outside of your control. The hospital-owned pharmacy is not on board as far as trying to be cost-effective, so forth and so on. Those regulations actually wanted you to take in the third year some downside risk. I think that's ideal, but I'd take even a lesser shared savings percentage but don't take downside risk until you've got 3 years plus of hitting within 5% of your target spend for that population. And I predict that most ACOs will never get 3 straight years. So why take risk on that when it's so variable? Here's another unsolicited bow note on savings pools. Get this question all the time. Doesn't shared savings, doesn't that penalize the high-performing accountable care organization after the first year? Isn't that like the Olympic medalist that gets a gold medal the first year, but the next year they're a failure unless they break their record? Well, that's what logic is, but the answer is actually no. It's not you beating yourself each year, but it's you against the unmanaged field. What the cost would have been without your accountable care organization and what they actually were. I've done these; they're really not that hard. So if you are a top ACO, you should do well. I won't say perpetually, because eventually, hopefully, this will sort of take over and squeeze the waste generally out of the healthcare system. But a top ACO should feast for 5 or 6 years at least. I've been approached by venture capital firms who are dying to get involved in primary care-centric accountable care organizations because they see the huge amounts of shared savings distributions that will be available in the first 6 years. And those are smart people. And that is the one, you against the field, it had some bugs in it, but that is one thing that those federal regulations actually got right. And I'm doing some Medicare demonstration projects and some other shared savings programs, and that's almost universally the approach. It's probably the most misunderstood thing about accountable care financing. Primary care is not only being asked to lead, you have new leverage. The power is shifting to savings centers from cost centers. If you're well informed, big if, you're going to have a seat at that table. This includes not just negotiations with payors or the ACO who presents you a contract, but also hospital employment and the terms of your hospital employment, or whether you should even consider being employed. What are your options? You now have choices. I thought I was suddenly a better negotiator for physicians. Then I remembered that I had the payers behind me pushing savings. I had the 800-pound gorilla telling them to get their act together and get on board, and that primary care, who get it, and are using the right technology platform and have gotten their best practices together, are very, very popular, very, very much in demand, are very, very strong drivers of the new system. 8, you have an opportunity to lead. Well, what does that really mean? It's poignant when I said that, get up there and lead, and then I got a polite question, well, what does that mean? We've never been allowed to lead or asked to lead. And so I tried to break that down. What do you do exactly? We actually have an article. I think it's coming out in your newsletter on this in the next issue or two, specifically on what it really, break this down, what it really means. Well, here's the drill on family physician ACO leadership. Here's a handful of things that I would definitely do. And maybe it's not the notion of leadership that you were thinking about. Gain quiet confidence yourself from being prepared. You can remember in a few hours' time. It's about different specialties across the continuum being accountable as a team for that patient population. This is tough culturally. So interact with other specialists. Get out of your silo. It will happen naturally. Let's say if you have an accountable care organization idea that you'd like to, quote, run by them or like their input on, that's exactly what I would do. It develops a cohesiveness and collegiality because you're focusing on the patient, you're focusing on creativity, it's challenging intellectually, and it's not a win, and it reminds them this is a win-win thing as opposed to win-lose. Now, one tip, get an impeccable third-party source to develop your shared savings distribution formula, how you divide the pie. You don't want to be telling some specialist how much he or she gets, and you don't want them telling you how much to get. But if that's done by a third party, the rest is really on the clinical side, and it's actually very exciting. If you do that step-by-step approach that we talked about. Quiet leadership. You don't need to grab the podium. Be a collaborator. Have thoughtful comments. Make others better and more successful. But don't be random. Once you've read the blueprint and digested it, thought about it, and you can walk in a room and know in 15 minutes whether a person or facility has a chance of getting it. It's that win-win mentality that is unmistakable. The stress of change and how it makes people freeze and hunker down is contagious. But so is the well-informed optimism of a champion. You never need, in my 30 years of representing doctors and 12 of doing integrated care, you never need more than 5 champions, and one is often enough. You probably already know that. But it must be a trusted peer to pull that off. Suppose you're employed by a health system. More than half of physicians are employed these days by health systems. Are you powerless, or are you in the catbird seat? Well, the answer is you're not powerless, and you're not necessarily in the catbird seat either. A well-informed primary care champion should be courted by a hospital, especially once the reimbursement change reaches the tipping point. You move from fee-for-service, pay for volume, pay for high-cost procedures, and it moves to pay for value. If you're an insider, help them achieve the 8 elements. If they get the fairness part and this innovation to primary care part right, then more integrated structure could be actually the ideal scenario. The tendency, as you know, or would suspect, is that hospitals at the early stage have a strong tendency to make up their lost hospitalizations out of the savings pool, and if there's anything left, to distribute it to the providers. I think that ultimately will be a fatal flaw if they. That's just so counter to the whole point of the aligned incentives from the savings pool, and not just the food fight of who's got the most power or who controls the pot. But suppose your hospital ACO is fatally flawed. This is covered in an affiliation guide that's also on your website, and we don't have time to cover that in detail here, but there are rights and remedies. Even if you've signed non-competes and you've signed exclusives with your hospital, there are a number of rights and remedies that are emerging, particularly given the shortage of primary care and the policy benefits of making that generally available. Okay, last one, strategy number 10. This is truly a historic opportunity for your academies. Why is that? There's knowledge-based solutions common to everybody. You have leadership training opportunity, peer review opportunity. There's going to be a need for forward-thinking political. It's not reactionary political influence, but forward-thinking, prospective, keep healthcare ball moving forward. That's all going to be needed, and they're all well suited for a professional society. But it is not business as usual. Those of you listening obviously have it, but all of you should have a real sense of urgency around this. This window, America's in a desperate strait. They're giving physicians, primary care physicians, the ball, 2 minutes left in the ball game, if you will. But this window of opportunity is not going to continue. So in conclusion, I think that this could be the golden age for primary care if you step up and assume a new leadership role. Every specialty should be viewing how it can best contribute to the success of the whole. And so I'm speaking to family physicians, but I've spoken to other specialties and medical societies, and it should apply equally to the hospitals. Every specialty should look, how can I maximize my value to the system and contribute to the success of the whole? And if everybody starts doing that and that culture changes, this could be the answer for the ills of healthcare, or the best answer, and it should be a tremendous economic and professional opportunity for primary care. As I close, as I've probably made extremely obvious, as your advocate, being unprepared is simply not an option. The status quo is a huge choice, and that is not an option. Thank you very much. I must say it is an honor to be on your team. You are the good guys in all of this, and I think opportunity knocks. I think we have time for some questions.
If anybody has any questions, they can write them at the chat box.
I see we got some questions. Okay. One question I've been asked is if I were a Colorado family physician, what would I do? And it just sort of taking the materials and this presentation, but just that's from my heart and in my best shot as your advisor. You obviously have a proactive academy that gets it. I actually think you have the president-elect of the AAFP, if I'm not mistaken, which is another indicia. You also have some activities already with your state Medicaid program, and I think I may have read in the press that you have some advanced integrated care already in your state. And so, here's what I'd do. I'd carefully appoint a CAFP ACO work group, get the right people on it, get diversity, but get people who are committed and willing to roll up their sleeves, get up to speed, harness that potential of accountable care, and marry that with the gaps in care and the needs where you can have high impact at quickest at the lowest cost. Just for example, Community Care North Carolina has saved North Carolina Medicaid $1.5 billion, and I can promise you these are very low-tech activities. It's just people are getting behind thinking about how much it costs for an entire patient population. Make it as grassroots as possible, and it is actually what you're doing, I understand, but I would hit Medicaid first and have a statewide medical home network to cover Medicaid. I'd keep an eye, not just take a PMPM, but I'd keep an eye on how much costs were and how much and quality and cost, and always keep the door open for a shared savings. What'll happen is, and then I really think you need to keep your eyes open and pounce on the Medicare shared savings initiative if those regulations are decent as they were promised to family physicians. They would be, and of course your Medicaid baseline and framework could make that give you a head start for the Medicare shared savings program. And if this is what's happened almost by accident, once you get to that point, the self-funded, the state employees, some private insurers will get in line. They see it's a better healthcare model. But really have, in a new way, in the new world, have the CAFP step up and maybe start a subsidiary. Maybe it shouldn't be under your association, but I would take advantage of your close-knit, medical community there, family physicians, and other specialties there in Colorado, and maybe start with that, and that'll prime the pump and help you get your infrastructure together without having to try to raise capital through less desirable means.
Mr. Bobbitt, do you see we have a series of questions from various attendees on the webinar?
Yes.
Okay.
One question was, what do I see happening if we let the window close? And it's not going to be pretty. What would probably happen would be that you cede it needs to be for the patient. At the end of the day, we need to stretch that healthcare dollar and save the system. Along the way, it will save the independent judgment, integrity, and stature of medical care and physicians, and protect and possibly improve your reimbursement. But if you see just some scenarios, if you ceded it to insurance companies who've not been in, I don't want to be overly blank because I'm approached by some insurance companies in hospitals, but let's say heretofore, I've seen insurance companies, they're making some people making a lot of money under a broken system, and they're not in a tremendous hurry to fix it. I told you the penchant for hospitals to pay for lost hospitalizations off the top, that will probably fatally kill this movement. So then you would probably know better than I would. Do we go to a single payer? Well, I see that being two-tiered medicine. I really don't see, there is no plan B, frankly, except people going without care or people having a very, very, a universal Medicaid program and a reimbursement level, and then people going to Bermuda or Canada to get, pay their care from, out of private means. The employment agreements relating to ACO, somebody said, do you have samples of wording or phrases that should be included or excluded in the employment agreement pertaining to ACOs? The answer is yes. There are, I think I just said generally, you want to be able to, unfortunately, some hospital employment agreements still say it's all based on RVUs. It's all based on work values. And you want to be able to bust that salary cap if it's a performance-based reimbursement. The second is you want to seat at the table on anything that comes to accountable care, shared savings, bundle payments. You need to be, I actually worked with Horn LLP, who specifically said that the value of a family physician, primary care physician, including family physician, who really gets it on the building accountable care organizations and the like, actually is worth more potentially than your opportunity cost of seeing patients. So time spent on administrative work in the proper setting is actually worth more than seeing patients. So you should get an administrative stipend. Email me. I think my email address is there in, what do you call that, green, turquoise, at the bottom of the page, and be happy to give you specific contract language. By the way, there's also if you want to email me, you might think it's funny that a lawyer is talking. I never mentioned legal issues or legal structures. They're in the other materials, but feel free to email me. We've got a white paper on navigating the legal minefield for ACOs. The reason I didn't mention it is that culture, physician-driven best practices, you guys identifying what data you need, you identify gaps in care in your community, that's what you need to focus on. You get a decent health lawyer, and they can get you through the legal issues. You get a good HIT guy that, they can get you the IT, a business person can work out the administrative issues. How interested are self-funded groups in working with ACO-like health neighborhoods? You need to Google. That's a question from Grenada. You would not believe the queue of self-fundeds here in North Carolina. Google First in Health. We are proud of the Wright brothers being first in flight. And GlaxoSmithKline, GSK, is working with the medical home neighborhood, and they want to make that the first in health, a national model to grow into, to have a primary care centric ACO and grow that out into a full-blown ACO using Community Care North Carolina. And they've enlisted Car Drugs, and GlaxoSmithKline's a big employer here in the Research Triangle area of North Carolina, a large drugstore, two of the biggest self-fundeds, and others are in the queue, and 500,000 of the state employees' health plan are also getting on board through the First in Health program. So that's the cool part. It's like it used to be the doctor-driven integrated care would be the fox's garden hen house. Now there's not a presumption necessarily in your favor yet, but if you make your Colorado Medicaid program click, and I'm not sure when I last looked at it, I'm not sure you had that core of a centralized information sharing platform, but let's say you make that click, then it'll just grow from there, and the self-fundeds would be very, very interested in this. One of the reasons is insurance companies they collect premiums. They're not actually holding the risk, but a self-funded is probably why you asked this question particularly. They are holding the risk. They're holding every single dollar of payment. So if you can make the patient, their employees, better employees, happier, have higher quality, and lower their costs from what they would have been, they're very interested. And also, culturally, that's what they get awards for in whatever their industry is. So they're much more, in fact, the more you think about it, I've always thought that the large self-funded employers would be the ones who would push this, and that's actually starting to happen. Question is, what about a single payer as a more direct solution to this problem? And that's really beyond my pay grade. I like to see the excitement in the eyes of physicians when that creative and entrepreneurial capitalism, if you will, of being entrusted to redesign the system. And the better you do, the higher the quality and lower the cost, the more you're rewarded. And it's frankly not about the money, but I think particularly if it's a top-down fee-for-service, I think it would still be and have artificially, set. Your compensation is still artificially set. I think some of the problems that we're facing today would continue. I know our expenses in America are 4 times what they are in other countries, just because we have this welter of different programs and standards. So there's something to be said for making it uniform and standardized and single. But I don't, you may be, as the expression goes, maybe trading the devil for his wife there. But again, I'm pretty much incompetent to truly address that knowledgeably. One question was, how do you recommend primary care communicate with specialty care physicians when this model will shift power and resources to primary care? Great question. I'm actually working with specialists who are the simple answer is that the specialists are starting to see the world changing. It's not like they can hold on to yesterday. They're saying the future is either I work harder for less money and have less control, or I get on the best possible integrated care team, and this is happening in my experience. And the best care team, the winning team, is going to be that medical home-centric ACO that are trying to be fair. And all I'm going to do is try to provide the maximum. And so the new money game is I need to get involved. I need to make sure the pie is as big as possible, the savings pool pie, and that's by make sure I'm on a successful accountable care organization to begin with. It has all eight essential elements, and then I need to make my contribution as big as it possibly can. So my slice out of that pie is going to be as big as it possibly can. Be careful about assuming that, but it's the same thing with hospitals. But the other is that I think Raquel mentioned the upcoming webinar. That webinar is going to be entirely devoted to this question: how do you work with specialists? So that's a great question, and I hope I hope you'll tune in for that, because it's not been the problem. Maybe it self-selects in these early accountable care organizations, but the enlightened physicians, if you think about the new future, they need to find the best horse to ride, and the best horse to ride is a medical home neighborhood-based ACO, and that would be my pitch, but be subtle about it, and use that quiet leadership and those principles about the new leverage and the new leadership to engage in that conversation. The other answer to your question would be to have a project, and the intellectual rigor takes over, and it becomes a we conversation and not a me, win-lose. It's a win. It's got to be a win-win thing. I'd also make them read the at least part one. I've got the same part one, and the part two is actually for anesthesiologists, and they're totally on board with this. And if they understand ACOs, it shouldn't be. It's not going to be easy because they're losing. Some people make a lot of money in these expensive procedures, but it's not like that. Those days will last. That's like saying I need to keep making buggy whips as opposed to car engines. Those days are going to be over, and they need to understand how do they optimize themselves into the new future.
Okay, Mr. Bobbitt, thank you so much for all of the information you've given us.
My pleasure.
We have 1 more minute to go at 1 o'clock. Are there any final comments you want to say? And then we'll see you again on November 2nd.
Not really. There's some great questions here, and I didn't get to all of them, but thank you. I just like being on your team, Raquel, and I'd be happy just on my nickel to field any questions directly, email to me, and I'll follow up, and hopefully we can keep building this knowledge base and momentum through these webinars and then your program in April. But most of all, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for participating.